All right. Another week, another many
Another
news cycles.
2 weeks, it feels like, I think.
I think this week feels like 40 years
Yeah.
for a number of reasons. Obviously, the first thing that we'll talk about is the passing of Justice Ginsburg, which many people are rightfully distressed and sad about. I mean, she was just an incredible human being, first of all.
Absolutely.
A trailblazer. She fought for, civil rights and human rights and women's rights her entire career, up until the day she died, pretty much. I think a lot of people have been saying, her death is tragic. I don't think it's tragic in the sense that, she was an older woman. She had battled cancer 4 times. She lived a really incredible life. I think what's tragic about it is the fact that our political climate is so toxic that she had to stay in her position well past the time that she could have been enjoying her retirement.
Yeah. I mean, here, actually, before we get into that, there is one small thing. This thing's been kind of bothering me this week, and I wanted to get your opinion on it. But how come whenever people talk about the most influential rock bands, they never talk about the Beach Boys?
Okay, I saw your Facebook status on this, and I
needed to bring it up because I wanted your opinion.
Let's start with something lighthearted. I don't know why. I will say, in college, for one of my elective courses, I did take a rock music history class, and we did spend a good amount of time on the Beach Boys.
Oh, that's encouraging.
And specifically the rivalry between the Beach Boys and the Beatles that was going on.
You call it that. That's not a beef. Not what it's like today.
No, not what it's like today, but in terms of Brian Wilson pretty much going crazy over it. But
I've seen him live, by the way. It's amazing. Opening for Paul Simon. How the hell did I luck out like that?
I think part of it is that they've been playing their whole lives, with different lineups. They've been going by the Beach Boys the whole time. And whereas someone like the Beatles that broke up pretty much at the height of their careers, I think part of it is not having them around.
I guess yeah, in a sense. But also, I mean, yeah, the Beach Boys have been around for a long time, but at the same time the Beatles were doing their thing, the Beach Boys were revolutionizing rock in their own way. Those two could be considered 2 of the earliest modern rock groups.
Oh yeah, I would say the 2 of them, and then the Rolling Stones.
And the Rolling Stones, I mean, they were even a little bit after the 2 of them. Not by much, by a couple of years, but still, I don't know. It just bothers me. I feel like people think of the Beach Boys as just the holiday music without ever really or the fun summer music without ever really realizing with that, a lot of our modern music can draw roots from the Beach Boys just as much as they can draw roots from the Beatles.
Oh, totally. And maybe you're probably right about it being a lot of this summer music, these cutesy kind of songs are what they're really known for. Yeah. But I think that
I get around out of my head for the last 2 weeks. It's just been in my head.
There you go. The Beach Boys need more credit. That's where we'll start off at.
This is our first sweeping conclusion of the day.
Maybe we can't get the rights to a Beach Boys song, but maybe at some point once we have sponsorships, we'll
Hey, we can open with I Get Around.
There we go.
All right, so Ginsburg. Yeah. I mean, you know, we've heard about Ruth Bader Ginsburg our whole lives growing up, how important she is, what she's done, what you know, who she is as a figure, what she represents in the American government, and you know, all the firsts that she was. And you know, it's just, we were all, of course, you know, on the left, we were all hoping that she would live through till at least, you know, either November or, depending on the outcome, January. And I don't know if I want to jump into the whole Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham thing, because I think I'm just going to get really mad and just start really just, I'll lose my objectivity for a moment there, because I'll tell you what, Lindsey Graham is really, he really pissed me off, dude. He really pissed me off.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, this is just a case of really obvious hypocrisy. But at the
Obvious,
same
you couldn't even
time,
be less obvious. Their excuse was the dumbest fucking excuse I've ever heard. McConnell and Graham, they're like, oh, well, you voted in the majority. You literally took more words to say, well, it's our side now. That's all you fucking said with those words. And I told you I was going to get mad. I told you I was going to get mad.
Here's the thing that I mean, it is infuriating, but at the same time, it's completely 100% expected. Like,
yeah, but just because it's expected doesn't make it any less infuriating. And I did actually think, I didn't think McConnell would reverse it. You know, McConnell, this is the moment he's been in the Senate for his entire life. This is what he's been waiting for. But Lindsey Graham said that shit in 2016. He said it. And I thought maybe, just maybe, he couldn't allow himself to be so unbelievably, incredibly, without precedently hypocritical.
I mean, here's the thing. When it happened,
like if I came in our next week and I was like, oh, sorry, man, I'm actually a Republican. Sorry.
It's totally blatant hypocrisy. But here's the thing. In 2016, when they blocked Obama's nominee, the reasons that they gave back then were just, that happened in January. They waited until,
and we're even closer now,
the next year.
There's never been a Supreme Court justice picked this close to election. It's never happened.
It's never happened. And their excuses last time were also complete, like, just unfathomable.
That's fine, but they set the precedent. They said it when they made those shitty excuses, which were, we should never do, you know, appoint somebody this close to an election. Fine, well, put your motherfucking money where your mouth is, or get the fuck out. And I'm tired of this blatant hypocrisy being wiped off with milquetoast bullshit excuses, and then his people, seeing the hypocrisy, don't even care. They don't even call out their own side. They say, oh, your heads are exploding. Well, yeah, our heads are exploding because you said some shit and then you wouldn't do it. You know what that's called? That's called fucking lying. When you lie to us, it pisses us off.
I'll tell you why this is happening, and I think why they don't care about being so shameful.
Why it's happening?
Well, obviously they want another nominee, but I think a big part of it.
Some of them are trying to push it through before the election, so that they can use it to justify, you know, a similar situation to the Bush election.
That is 100% why it could be, but the other reason I think is they'd have no confidence right now that Trump is going to win the election.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying this is no, I think if it were no confidence, they'd just be like, we'll just do it in the lame duck if that's the case. But they're trying to push it through before the election. I think they're trying to use it to assist him with the election. Now, this is opinion, okay? I don't have any facts here. I'm going on prior behavior. And I don't know how many people know much about human psychology, but if you're talking about predicting human behavior, looking at their prior behavior is usually going to give you a really good chance of knowing what they're going to do next. And the way the Trump administration treats the rules around elections, I wouldn't be surprised if they were trying to find a way to put somebody in the Supreme Court who would allow him to sneak around, say, waiting for the rest of the ballots to be counted, things like that.
I mean, well, we can also talk, because this is going to be related, about the comments that Trump made in the press, which were very clear.
Boy, I'm going to need you to be a lot more specific than that.
regarding what would happen if he were to lose, would he concede? And his response was, the ballot should be thrown out. And I can get the exact quote that he said.
Well, that's not going to happen.
It was something along the lines of, there wouldn't be a turnover of power, there would be a continuation of power, and that the ballot should be thrown out.
Yeah, he's saying, I mean, look, I think people are probably overreacting to that. I think that's just another quote Trumpism where he says something stupid and he doesn't realize what he's saying.
But he's said it multiple times now.
Yeah, but what I think no, not that specific way. He said different things. He said, I don't, problem with the mail-in ballots. He's never said, I'm going to throw the ballots out. He said they should be, because whatever, he's been fed misinformation, or is trying to feed the misinformation that mail-in ballots don't work. But what does he think he's going to get away with? He can't just toss them out. And not only that, I think he's just, the continuation of power is him just saying, well, I would win the election. That's all he's saying.
When you take it in combination with what is happening with the Supreme Court pick, though, and at the same time let's take Bill Barr's comments about mail-in ballots being rife with fraud. So I think there is a likely
commission to investigate. If the executive branch has any involvement in any investigation, that's a complete conflict of interest. There's no way that I don't even see the Senate allowing that to happen.
If there are 6 Supreme Court justices that lean towards Trump, and
Roberts is not going to vote in his favor if it comes to election interference, I promise you.
But if, let's say, he says, for some reason, and he has the Department of Justice on his back, there's rife with fraud in terms of mail-in ballots, a lot of them are fraudulent, and he takes this up to the Supreme Court.
You have to show the proof to the American people for something like that. You can't just, there's no way we are going to take that lying down if he just says, trust me, it's wrong. That's not, the Supreme Court isn't going to take that. The Senate and there have been points where he has gone too far and even the Senate has said no.
Well, I think he's going to sue. I would think he would sue the U.S. government or sue the election committee and then now, even if it's not a case that has any proof, he would still hold up the election for months and months and months and months.
So yeah, that's the problem, is if we get to January and he's holding it up.
Because this could be tied up in courts for who knows how long.
So he's brewing a potential civil uprising against him. He understands this, right?
Well, here's the thing too. There are a lot of right-wing militias in this country, in blue states, and all over the country.
They seem to be stopping these protests.
they're not stopping the protests, but here's the thing. Let's say, there's some sort of constitutional crisis where the election is tangled up in courts for months, and it comes January and there hasn't been an official winner one because it's still tied up in courts. Basically, the way it would work, under my understanding, is that the Speaker of the House would be acting president if it comes past inauguration, and until whatever this is resolved.
I'm sure he would love for Nancy Pelosi to be the acting president. Are you kidding me, dude? He'd be removed from power. He'd be removed in like 2 seconds.
Yes, he would, ideally, but he would also have tons of supporters who have
the military generals, they're not on his side. The military would not support him. And that's where he would be in big trouble, because, I don't care how many militias you have. The military, A, listens to the commander-in-chief, who at that point would be Nancy Pelosi. And B, the generals, pretty much all of the generals, the major ones, have come out and rebuked him already. I don't see that working out well for him, man. He does not have a lot of recourse at this point. And I think he's freaking out. He's seeing the walls are closing in. He knows the moment he steps out of the White House, he's getting charges brought up against him. This is desperation, and it reeks of desperation. He's trying to stay out of jail.
Yeah, the reasons that all this is happening are obvious. I think the conclusions of what will come of all of this aren't so obvious and are a lot more difficult to predict.
I still trust the people overall. I trust that our system will work itself out, but it all depends on people like McConnell and Lindsey Graham growing a set of balls and having some real morality.
That's not going to happen. Here's the thing.
It's happened before. And when shit hits the fan, when it came to, Trump suggesting moving the election, for example.
The Republicans who are going to not vote for a justice are going to be, in all likelihood, less than the amount that they would need to stop it from happening. And it's going to be Republicans that are in danger of losing their seats if they show their hypocrisy by voting for a judge. It's going to be like Susan Collins, for instance, is going to say no. She already has. Because if she votes...
But it doesn't matter anymore because Romney already said yes.
Romney says yes. He's also not in danger of losing his position.
Yeah, but he said yes. He said he's going to vote to confirm.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's going to be...
He's going to vote to put up a nominee, not to confirm necessarily.
Oh, yeah. But here's the thing, too. That shows his... Even more so with his grandstanding during the impeachment. And then now he's coming back and said, you know what? I think this president was worth impeaching, but at the same time, I think we should slam through his justice pick. It shows...
Well, I don't know if it's that cut and dry. Perhaps he thinks maybe we should have an opportunity to at least, have them put somebody up. They may not get confirmed, right? Because they didn't confirm Merrick Garland.
Yeah. We'll see. It's going to happen around Halloween.
I tend to have a lot of clarity on things like this, and I have no clarity right now on any of this. I tend to be very good at predicting how these things are going to go, and I have no idea what's going to happen.
I don't think anybody does. I don't think the politicians themselves have any
idea. Crazy. How can we please learn a lesson? Can you make America great again? Idiots, please take off your stupid fucking hats for a second and realize what side of history you're on right now. Because when this happens, and a lot of people leave this country, because they will, a second term, a lot of people are definitely going to leave this country.
Travel ban,
when
they
all those,
can't.
well, as soon as they can, when you look at where all the actual smart people are going, and you realize your country's becoming less and less viable without those people, and it's all because you idiots supported this nonsense from 50 years ago, you're going to be reaping what you sow, man. That's what they don't understand, is that no, we are not just a bunch of snowflakes and pussies. We're pissed off. And we believe in the Second Amendment too, man. We do.
I kind of want to jump towards something, because if there is a change in this country, I think this is going to be like a symptom of who stays and who goes. And it's about how little recent American history people learn in school. And this was something that I was talking about with my wife after we recorded our first episode.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of shocked by it, to be honest, because I did end up learning some of this in school.
Now, for a comparison, before you continue, I think I'll have a good perspective, additional commentary, because I want to hear more about your experience. But I went to school overseas most of my life, so I learned differently than you guys did here. I was shown a very more real history than unfortunately folks in the United States were.
I had a particularly good history teacher. He was a little quirky, but I ended up learning a lot about it, and I think I learned quite a bit of history that I hadn't learned prior to that. And this was in my this was in my junior year of high school. And I luckily learned pretty much up, I think the end of the course was post 9/11, like right up to the Iraq War. And this would be in 2006. So it was pretty current, what I learned from, the start of United States history up until modern day. I learned that in my wife's class, which is probably a lot more common than in the class that I had taken at my high school, she didn't learn anything past, I think it was the 1960s.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
I mean, we did at my school, we did everything all the right up until present day.
Yeah. So and she went to a very good high school. I won't mention which one, but it was very good high school around here.
Why not?
And and
you're scared to put them under the hot seat?
Oh no.
You're an adult. What are they gonna do? Suspend you?
I just don't want any personal information on the internet, as little as possible for it. But here's the thing. She went to a very good high school, and I think if that school is not teaching up until the present day, most high schools are not going to be teaching up until the present day. And the reason that even came up is because there was a I forgot, I'll have to look up and fact check later where I read this, but there was some study done that said that like 30 or 40% of Americans students, or American current like high school students even knew what the Holocaust was.
I know, I saw that. That was really upsetting to me, because I've come from a Jewish family. I was raised Jewish.
Yeah.
And I've been saying over the last few months, I'm getting very concerned about the growing strain of anti-Semitism in this country, right? This whole myth that Jews control everything. Have you looked at the number of Jews that are controlling things? That's not the case. If we want to talk about a conspiracy of who's controlling and making everything wrong, it's the Christians then, because those are the ones who control most of the things. So stop kidding yourself and falling for their propaganda, and realize it has nothing to do with what religion you are, because that's stupid. It has to do with who you are and your behaviors and what you choose to do.
Yeah, I mean, that is another whole thing on its own. But I think just the fact that we had in this world a government that turned on its own people, killed a lot of its own people, imprisoned people for speaking out against them. And this what?
Wait, when are we talking?
I'm talking about World War II. I mean, we could talk about North Korea, but I'm talking about.
Are you talking about Germany?
I'm talking about Germany.
I was talking about the United States.
Well,
in World War II.
We did it too. We had Japanese internment camps.
Absolutely. And everybody forgets about that. They conveniently forget about it when they talk about it. And I especially never forget about it because FDR is my favorite president, and he was the one who did that shit.
Well, I was talking with my father-in-law even, and I don't know, like, we live in Los Angeles. That's a pretty, considered to be a very liberal city.
That's because you haven't spent any time talking to some of these idiot hippies here. I'm sorry. That was a very general and wide-ranging term, but you know who I'm talking about. These dumbass woke motherfuckers who think they know what's going on and they're part of some little special secret.
Well, there are parts of LA, like the Sawtelle area, which is highly...
think crystals will heal you and your chakras are out of alignment. Get the fuck out of here.
Well, there are places in LA, like I was going to say the Sawtelle area, where that was the only area where Japanese people were allowed to live and have businesses and stuff. And you still see the remnants of that to this day. In that, if you walk down that street, you have Little Osaka, and there's lots of Japanese restaurants and Asian restaurants and stuff. But here's the thing, like, we barred people from opening businesses wherever they wanted. We had them go to internment camps during World War II. And yes, that is the United States. But here's the thing too.
Killed a lot of them too. Like, they were not treated well in those internment camps. Those were not good conditions. A lot of people died.
Yeah. And you don't hear about it as much. Obviously, history is written by the victors. But, I mean, there was a lot of fascist, like, government overreach behavior in the 1930s and 40s all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're not going to learn about that in school, or if we're going to just glance over that in school, people are not going to know what it was like to live in those conditions or pre those conditions, what led up to those conditions. And we're running into things in this country that are similar to how the country was in the 30s and 40s prior to this. So it's like, you need to know your history and you need to know how your government has behaved up until that point in order to not recreate it. And it's not happening.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even have much to add to that. That's like when I sit there for like half an hour, 45 minutes and just go on forever to whoever I'm talking about how I can't believe how things are going. You know, it's always like, how can we be repeating and doing the same things that we already did before? It's like, how do you not learn? Like for example, I love to bring up, this is just an easy one to poke fun at. This is low-hanging fruit, but I love to bring up libertarians and pure free market economics. And I'm like, you do realize antitrust laws actually came from something, right? Like we didn't just found America with antitrust laws. There were monopolies that were screwing up the economy for everybody else. And we implemented antitrust laws, but they only covered monopolies. So now we're in a situation where they're like, oh, well, we'll just have some oligopolies. And it's the same thing. It's just more than one company.
Yeah. I mean, it's run rampant. Like you have 3 cell phone companies now that really control everything. And even those smaller cell phone companies are owned by those bigger ones. You have in any given neighborhood, you have maybe 2 options for internet. Or cable?
I only have one. I only have one in my building. Spectrum. That's it.
So I have two, and I have AT&T and Spectrum, but AT&T is so slow that it's not a viable option. And then there'll be other areas where, yeah, there's one, and even if it's two, sometimes it's like only one is a realistic option.
Exactly. And it's like, how is that not a violation of antitrust laws? I mean, if you have one company that is clearly keeping their service lower than the other, then that's not fair competition. That is absolutely not fair competition.
There's so many things that, you know, when you start looking back of how we came to this point, that there could have been a lot of things we avoided.
Yeah, if they hadn't stripped away regulation for decades and decades, since Ronald fucking Reagan, the Republican hero, came along and started us down this terrible path.
It's also, though, the people not realizing what's going on. So you're going to put people in office that will allow that to happen. I mean, ultimately...
Hey, look, I'll give Reagan this, though. At least he thought he was doing right by the American people. Reagan had good intentions. He just had very bad execution.
I watched, and I think it's on YouTube. It was the debate between Reagan and George Bush Sr. In like, what, 1980 or something?
Mm-hmm.
And they're talking about immigration.
Mm-hmm.
Mind-blowing, man. Like literally anyone, you guys need to see this, because the rhetoric that they both have in that video, they would be considered a radical leftist today.
I know. It's insane
me.
What's happened. It's insane how far to the right we've gone as a country, and how people don't realize that. Like, you know, there's a reason why the Nazis and the KKK are so stoked on the way it's been. And for some people, it's like they're just toads in the water, you know, as it heats up, and they didn't notice how far it's gone. But like, you guys, like you alt-right people, you guys are considered extremists by the rest of the world. I hope you understand that. You know who else are considered extremists? ISIS. You know who else are considered extremists? The North Koreans. People are starting to group you guys in with those people. I'm not saying that. I might think it, but I'm not saying it. And this is not my opinion that I'm sharing here. I grew up in 5 countries, so I know people all over the world. People are starting to group you guys in with those groups. Just want you to be aware of that.
I mean, there's so much that we can have people learn from a young age to avoid having extremist ideologies. We don't do it.
And then here we are. And then we, who would be considered centrists in many other countries, or just regular left, right, in many other countries, we are being labeled extremists. It's pure propaganda. You know, I lived in Russia right after the fall of the Soviet Union. My mother just came back from a posting as the head of the embassy in Cuba. We know what propaganda looks like, man. We know what it looks like. And guys, you're being propaganded to. I'm sorry. I know you don't like it. I know you think everything else is fake news, but no. You guys are the sources of fake news. I'm telling you. You got to do your research.
Did you read about the Patriotic Education thing?
Oh, I didn't, but just from the name of it, it sounds like some Hitler Youth type shit.
That was Trump's latest thing, is he wants education to be more patriotic and to put a positive spin on American history and what we've done throughout history.
I mean, that is exactly what the Hitler Youth did. It's exactly what the Hitler Youth did.
But it's called patriotism. It's called patriotic education, not nationalistic education.
I know, but we talked about that last time. And folks, you have to understand, words only have the same meaning of the context that you put behind it. You can call it patriotism all you want, but if it's nationalism, it's still nationalism. Doesn't matter how many times you call it patriotism, it's not.
Well, the other part of it is that
I'm
history.
really grumpy today. I am really fucking grumpy today. It's been a tough couple of weeks.
It's been this whole week has been really tough. The Laker game yesterday was so stressful too. They won, but I was so stressed
sports-wise, I'm pretty stoked because my Rams are doing well, and I don't really have my Spurs to watch for like the first time in 20 years. So
right. But yeah, I mean, patriotic education. It's just one more like. Let me, you know what? I'm gonna fact check myself right now because I want to hold myself accountable.
Please do.
And I want to pull up exactly what this story was.
And you know what? Fact check me too. Bring up what the Hitler Youth did day to day, and let's see if there's any comparisons. Now, don't quit, viewers. If you're a Trump supporter, listen to this, because this is not opinion what we're about to do. We're about to read what they do on both sides. If it's the same, own up to it. If it's not, we'll own up to it, and we'll talk about those differences.
All right, so this is just reading from NPR is where I'm getting this news source. I like NPR because they're just very neutral. So he announced on
not according to the far right.
Well, look, if you listen to NPR,
of course these people have never listened to NPR a day in their life. You think they're flipping through the radio, they hear a soft speaking voice about politics, they're actually going to listen to it? Get out of here.
It's too boring. And you know why it's boring? It's because it's neutral.
It's not Ted Nugent being a complete asshat.
So yeah, Trump announced, this was last Thursday, that he wants to create a commission to promote, quote, patriotic education, and announce the creation of a grant to develop a pro-American curriculum. And he said that there was a, quote, twisted web of lies being taught in US classrooms about systemic racism in America, and he called it a form of child abuse.
Okay, so, of course, in the Hitler Youth, they did a very similar thing with Jewish, sort of floating things out about Jewish people. It's the same.
It's very race-based, and that's what's similar about it. And he actually said, critical race theory, the 1619 Project, and the crusade against American history is toxic propaganda, ideological poison that, if not removed, will dissolve the civic bonds that tie us together. It will destroy our country, which somebody definitely wrote that for him.
Yeah.
Because there's no way he came up saying that.
I'll tell you what, man. This is an unpopular opinion, I think, that I hold. But I've always, even since I was a kid, I had a problem with the Pledge of Allegiance. I felt it was very, very propaganda-y.
The Pledge of Allegiance is a little bit propaganda-y.
I mean, the Hitler Youth did that every morning. They did like a pledge to Hitler.
So here's this is a quote from Hitler in 1938.
Boy.
About what goes on for the youth. These boys and girls enter our organization at 10 years of age, and often for the first time get a little fresh air. After 4 years of the young folk, they go on to the Hitler Youth, where we have them for another 4 years. And even if they are not complete National Socialists, they go to labor service and are smoothed out there for another 6-7 months. And whatever class consciousness or social status might still be left, the Wehrmacht will take care of that, which the Wehrmacht was the German armed forces. This is from the United States Holocaust Museum, by the way. I'm getting this information. But basically, Nazi scholars and educators, they glorified Nordic and other Aryan races while labeling Jews and other so-called inferior people as parasitic or bastard races. I think it's kind of good that we're going over this because of how few people evidently know about this stuff.
Yeah.
But it started in the classroom. It started with education. And it started with saying that, you know, it's very race-based, which is very similar to this patriotic education, which is saying that, you know what, we need to put a little bit more lightheartedness in all of the really horrible things the United States did in terms of racism throughout the history of this country. I mean, how horrible were we to the Native Americans at the start, to slaves, you know, we were talking about to the Japanese during World War II. And now we have people in camps. I mean, did you see there was a whistleblower that came out that talked about a ICE detention center where a doctor was forcing hysterectomies on women? Like, this is horrific stuff.
That's eugenics. That's eugenics. That is straight out of the Nazi playbook. Straight out of the Nazi playbook.
One thing I do want to be clear about is that specific detention center was privately owned. And I'm not going to say that this is happening.
Fucking worse, because think about it, man. How the fuck are we allowing private detention centers to deal with something that is clearly a federal responsibility? This should not be privatized ever.
Well, I agree. I don't think we should have detention centers privatized. I don't think we should have privatized prisons.
Let alone dealing with immigrants, but just in general.
Well, here's the thing. Just the concept of a privatized prison is insane to me because they are profiting off crime.
But they're profiting off of legalized slave labor. And a lot of people have talked about this, right? I'm not trying to use a buzzword, but if you look at what they're doing, they're cutting deals with departments. And we know this. Like, we know this. People have been caught doing this a bunch of times. They're cutting deals with judges. They're cutting deals with law enforcement departments to get more prisoners so that they can use them for cheap, illegal labor and have it be legal.
The root of it, though, is that it's a for-profit prison, which means that they need to have quote unquote criminals filling it to do whatever they do to create their profit. So at the root of it is a need for crime to happen in order for prisons to be filled. Right. So it is literally a criminal enterprise. And here's the other thing, and like you were saying, they're cutting deals with judges and this and this and that. If the crime doesn't exist, the crime will be created to fill those prisons. So,
and we're not just saying some crazy conspiracy thing. Like, this has happened. This has been found to have happened. This is why this is a problem in American politics. This is why under the Obama administration, we tried to start shutting them down, is because we have examples of this happening and it's widespread enough that it's a big problem. This wasn't like a one-off and every other private prison is this great, really ethical place. That is so not what we are seeing. They're overcrowded. The prisoners, I mean, the recidivism rates are extremely high. Like, this is not the sign of a functioning justice system.
Well, because they need the recidivism to keep the jails full. It's like any business needs to have their customers keep coming back.
What is this idea that everything needs to be run as a business? What is this fetishization we have with capitalism? It's ridiculous. You want to put it literally everywhere. You think, how do people not understand that this just leads to social Darwinism? This leads to people being stepped over and trodden on because everyone's just trying to get ahead. We need to support our people. We don't need to just drop them out there and be like, oh, either sink or swim. It's a reflection of privilege, of people who've never lived in a position in their lives that they don't actually have what they need. Me included, I've never really been in danger of truly, being poor and out on my own, but at least I recognize that people don't have the same family situation that I do and the same upbringing that I do. And maybe that's because I lived in places where most of the population basically lives in squalor. But I think it's very hard for me to accept the fact that people don't know this and aren't just simply ignoring those parts, and because they want to believe that capitalism will work in its purest form.
I mean, part of it is part of it is, one, the thing that we have been taught in school since kindergarten is the, American dream, where if you hustle hard enough, you can achieve whatever you want.
One of my favorite quotes from anybody, and I know I'm bringing this up a lot. This man, I bring him up all the time, but he's on the point. But from George Carlin, when he said it's called the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe it.
Yeah. It's a good point. And that's one thing that gets hammered into us. And the other thing that gets hammered into us is a lack of empathy. And I think because
nobody has any empathy. You see, they treat homeless people like shit. It's like you're a valueless human because you don't make money for this massive machine of super rich people.
I mean, it's also like, and this could just be a sign of how our society views like masculinity. I think in a lot of ways is there's this like
macho bullshit.
Yeah, and it's super prevalent, and
it's dumb too. It's like that's such an arbitrary thing. Who decided that that's what that was? I think you're much bigger, man, if you can step up and look at the reality and call out the reality. You're no man if you put your fingers in your ears and just go, but capitalism, America, la 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 la. You're a little fucking weenie. That's what I think of you.
But that goes back to the propaganda techniques is not only just a sense of like calling nationalistic behavior patriotism, but when you combine that with like a machismo type behavior and you associate that with patriotism as well, then you have this combination of things, and it is, and it's not prevalent. I mean, it's not assigned to one specific race in this country. There are lots of, the machismo like behavior is all over.
Well, that's very diplomatic of you, but the problem is the white people. Let's be honest here. It's the far-right white nationalists that are the problem, the alt-righters. There's a few of them that are minorities, but if we take a look at the demographics, it's a very small percentage.
Well, obviously when you combine it with the nationalistic behavior, that's when it's the recipe for disaster. But I think the like toxic machismo is all over the place.
Yeah, but the toxic machismo in and of itself is not as much of an existential threat as it is an individual threat, right? Like, I think that is just as terrible a thing and it needs to be fixed. But if we're talking about the systematic problems we have in our country and the wide-ranging problems, I think that is very much squarely, specifically on white nationalism and how it's grown.
It's definitely a problem that needs to be addressed sooner than other things, because we're on the brink.
We saw that report from the DHS about how they directed them to downplay Russian threats and white nationalist threats.
It's one and the same, and it's at the same time a lot of those Russian threats or Russian propaganda techniques that are prevalent on social media are focusing on targeting that demographic of white nationalists because it's
well, they're the most easily manipulated through fear. That's all you need for nationalists is you throw a little bit of fear in there and they'll do whatever you say.
But they're also a group that's not targeted by the government seriously. If the group,
my friend, I'm pretty sure the government would, if they could, they'd publicly encourage them because they, mind you, not the whole government. I'm talking about the executive branch in particular. They seem to feel fine with supporting and not wanting to denounce anybody who's on their side.
I mean, that's how we have gotten to this point. But there also was a report that came out that said that there were alt-right like militias pre-planning violence for protests, specifically in Portland. But in all of these cities, and there's so much we can talk about because you have Bill Barr that's trying to designate certain cities as anarchist zones.
I really hope when this administration is out, he goes right before a judge, man.
It's going to be one thing or the other. It's either they win and this all just continues, or they lose real bad and the consequences come super quick. I mean, the New York DA already has all of this tax stuff on Trump just ready to go.
But they need to, here's what I was saying to somebody, is if they are ready to do that, if they're going to be successful, they need to actually arrest him and hold him. Otherwise, he's going to leave the country in like 2 seconds.
And not only will would he leave the country, he would say he's still leading the country while he's sitting next to Putin in Moscow.
Yeah, right. But
that's an opinion. That's an opinion, but we'll see.
That's not an opinion.
Or is it a prediction?
Come on, that's not going to happen. If he ran somewhere, he's not going to Russia. That would be dumb.
Well, we'll see in a few weeks, I guess.
Probably go to like some, part that's not part of anything, like one of those island nations that's like doing its own thing,
It could be some remote island where he gets a big gold mansion.
Yeah, this whole gold. How can you think that somebody whose every one of his houses is like lined with actual gold and everything looks like a king's mansion? How could you possibly believe that this guy cares about the little person? How could you possibly believe that?
It's baffling to me. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I'd love to get some Trump supporters on at some point.
Please, because I try to be objective, but today I just couldn't do it. Today I had so much pent up, I just had to let it out.
Next week we'll try to get a little bit more on track. I still want to talk about if we were saved from a war with Iran by the coronavirus. I think that'll have to go to next time.
Right, because the Trump supporters, they love to say that Trump didn't start any wars.
Right? We were this close.
We were this close, guys. And then there was a worldwide pandemic. So let's not count our chickens before next week.
But obviously, I think this was cathartic for both of us. We'll get back on track.
I've also really enjoyed watching your head get thinner and wider as you move around in your background.
I'm in space right now. I'm actually recording this from my voiceover closet. And I'm
show the people your tribute behind you.
I will show this. There's my Mamba jersey behind me. I just didn't want to show for the whole episode the tiny little cramped space I'm in. Now it looks like I'm in the wide reaches of outer space.
And I'm in the beautiful outdoors.
Alrighty, well, thank you for listening, you guys. Stay tuned for more.
Sorry for being so angry today.
I think a lot of people are. It's totally fine. We need this. We both need this. But see you guys next week.
This is why we need a second channel just for that.
Yeah, eventually. This has to catch on first. Once this catches on, we'll have many channels. But peace out.
See you next time.